You're listening to the Lifestyle Business Show with Lucy Gordon, the podcast of building a more profitable business that gives you the lifestyle and freedom you desire. I share strategies to streamline your business, increase your income, and reclaim your time so that you can spend more time doing what you love. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Lifestyle Business Show. In today's episode, I wanted to tell you a bit more about me and my business journey so that you can get to know me a bit more, and also about the process of converting a business from the monster that it was into a lifestyle business, and how I help and support other business owners now. So, to give you a little bit of background, let's go back to the beginning of my career. So I started working for a commercial real estate fund straight out of university. I'd studied economics as an undergraduate and then did a real estate in masters because I wanted to work in real estate. I wanted to become a chartered surveyor, and that was going to be my career path. So I had done the real estate masters to become accredited in order to be able to sit my APC, which is what the chartered surveyor's exam is. And then I had to work for 2 years before I could sit my exam. By the time I came to sit my APC, which was about sort of 2.5 years after I'd started in my role, I sort of realised I don't really need this. I realised that to do the job that I was doing, I didn't need to be a chartered surveyor. So, this was the first bit of frustration, I suppose, that I was starting to feel in the working environment and sort of following the paths that you're supposed to follow, as it were. Because I've been working for 2 years towards this and doing all of the sort of homework that you need to do it, and I realised I didn't need to. So I did sit the exam because obviously I'd done all the work towards it, and luckily I passed first time, so I didn't have to go through the whole painful process again. So as soon as I got my results, passed my exam, and became a chartered surveyor, nothing changed. As predicted, everything was exactly the same as it was before, and that was, as I say, the sort of first inkling that I just sort of knew slightly, what are we doing this for? And so sort of shortly after that, I decided to take 2 months off and go travelling, and luckily my company let me do that. So I did that, went to New Zealand and had the most amazing time. And I think the biggest thing that came out of that for me, obviously all of the travel and the amazing things, but also just how much creativity how much my brain expanded almost, because I was just so free and not thinking about work, not just going through the same routine all of the time. Suddenly I was free to have these thoughts and be creative. And that's one of the things that I love about that. When I look back at my journal from like travelling times, of just sort of how much fun I was having and how sort of creative and charismatic I was being. And of course that had to end, and I came back to work and literally nothing had changed. It felt like I'd gone away for 2 months and everything about the business was exactly where it was. And I felt like that was quite frustrating. And it was another one of those moments where I was like, what are we all doing this for? What is changing? Like, nothing is changing. We're all just doing the same thing. Everyone's buying and selling the same properties back and forth to each other. What is the point of all this? And there were several other things that happened over the next couple of years, which I've slightly touched upon, but I won't go into lots of detail. But effectively, I ended up having a mental breakdown and went into therapy, and I was still working, but I got to the point where I just couldn't keep doing it anymore. I just couldn't keep working in this role. So even though I did like the people and I was very capable of doing what I was doing, I just didn't really want to do that anymore, and I knew that I didn't want to go and do the same thing at a different company. So I decided just to hand in my notice and, figure out what it was I was going to do. I had a 3-month notice period, I had sort of 12 months of savings, and so I just decided to wing it. And it was during that notice period that then someone said to me, would you do a bit of freelance work for us? And of course I said yes, because it gave me a bit of income to come in while I was figuring things out. And next thing you know, I've started a business and I start doing freelance financial modelling for people. So what that was building cash flows and cash flow forecasts for real estate investors and developers and operators to help them, decide whether an investment is worth pursuing and help them sort of monitor that property once they actually own it. So I did that for a couple of years, and I was successful doing that. I had all inbound leads But basically, so the first day that I left my job, I sent an email to 3 people saying, hey, I'm doing this. If you know anyone who needs help, please let me know. All 3 of them responded and said yes. And from there, it became referrals and sort of word of mouth through LinkedIn. And that's how all of my work came to me. So I thought I was successful because I had this constant stream of clients, and I hired someone to join me. I was reaching, over 6 figures a year from inbound inquiries, and all of our clients were happy and it all seemed to be going so well. But the issue was that every single year I was burning myself out. I was feeling very stressed and anxious, and actually for me, hiring was a bit of a mistake, because having that responsibility of having to be, being responsible for someone's paycheck was just not something that I was capable of doing with my mental health at that point in time. And so it just added that extra bit of strain onto me to have to do that. And so long story short, eventually the person who was working with me left, and it just went back to being me again by myself. And again, I got to a point where I was thinking, there's too much work for just me to do, so I need to try and outsource this and scale things up to make it bigger, because unless I am making vast amounts of money every year, how, 1, am I a successful business, but also 2, how am I going to afford to do all these incredible things, i.e. retire as soon as possible? So I started outsourcing some of the work, but again, that just created more stress, because then suddenly I had all of these people who were working under my name and my brand, but that I had no control over, basically. And yeah, it got constantly very, very stressful. And then last summer, I had just a really, really nasty client who really pushed me over the edge and just pushed me to the point where I was like, I can't keep working in this kind of environment. I can't keep having these people who are quite disrespectful of my time and quite demanding of my time and sometimes quite rude. That's not how I want to work for the next however many years. And so that was the moment where I decided to pull the plug. And genuinely, I think I've said this on the podcast before, I was at the point where I was going to throw in the towel on the whole business and just pull the plug. But I realised that I had, luckily, already put in a whole lot of effort creating this online training academy. And I was just using that as a side thing. I wasn't really giving it that much attention once I'd actually set it up. I'd gone back to focusing on all of the clients who were asking for work. And I realised I don't need to do that. If I focus on building up the academy that I've already set up, then I can create more income, but in much less hours. So that is basically how I turned my business from working sort of 50-hour weeks with lots of demanding clients and working project to project into a recurring income stream. So I have said this so many times before, you can't just start a business and have passive income coming in from day one that's going to pay all your bills. I wish it's not as easy as that. You do have to put a lot of work in up front. So to be able to build the academy, I did have to sort of spend many, many weeks, probably about 8 weeks, creating training videos, uploading it all into the portal, obviously doing all of the marketing for it and stuff. But having spent that 8 weeks doing that, I now am very hands-off with it. So I have a VA who checks in with my students every day or every 2 days just to make sure no one's got any tech issues or questions or anything like that. And I will go into the portal and just check once or twice a week as well. But it honestly takes me, like the bit that takes me the longest in that business now is the sort of annual, I say annual, I don't mean annual, I mean weekly content creation and finances that I do. But genuinely, that takes me about 2 hours, if not less, every single week. And yet, that brings me enough money to pay all my bills. What happened there was that it took me to a point of breaking. So, it took me to a breaking point where I had to reassess the business to be able to get there. And I spent a lot of time wondering what the whole purpose of life was and the purpose of work and what we were all doing this for and why are we all doing this, and went through a big existential crisis because of the way that I'd been made to feel about my work and about, just generally my mental health. And so I made a promise to myself that I would do what I can to, one, not ever feel that way again myself, but also to help other people not feel that way. And that is why I started my new business, was to be able to support other business owners who are in the place that I was in with getting to a place that makes them happy. Because, one of the things I realised is that I was never particularly, probably if it was just me working the business, I was never going to be able to get to a point where I could sell the business as much as all of those private equity bros would come up to me and say your business is right for selling. I knew it wasn't, because it was just me doing work. If I wasn't there doing work, the business wasn't making any money. So that feeling of knowing that I would have to do this for years and years and years is what made me think I need to change this, because it was unsustainable for me to think I can keep doing financial modelling, which is a highly skilled, detailed thing, for the next 40 years to continue paying my bills. As a woman, there are a couple of days in the month where I don't want to work and I really can't concentrate in the same way that I normally can, and that's only going to get worse with age. And I don't want to be doing this when I'm 92. And so it was that sort of like, I need to find a way to make it scalable income-wise, but not scalable time-wise, that led me down this online academy route. And so that is what I did, because with that particular business, I'd also fallen out with real estate quite a lot last year as well. And so the thought of doing anything else that involved actively working in real estate just wasn't appealing to me. So the academy was the solution. So that's the sort of short story long that led me to here of why I've started this new business. Because, as I said, I felt awful. I just couldn't really see the point of living, the point of life, and felt terrible, but knew that in order to pay for this future, I had to work somehow. And I think the other thing that I found also, and this is what I talk about a lot on my social media and we've talked about in other podcast episodes as well, is that online they're just pummeling you with, you've got to make this amount of money, you've got to sell your business for multiple millions of pounds, you've got to be making 100k launches and etc, etc. Otherwise you're a failure. And I don't know how much of that stuff is true. I think I said that in last week's episode. I don't know how much of those numbers is actually true and how much of that is profit. And in a way it's irrelevant, because actually those aren't the numbers that I need to live my life. So that's how I started my whole movement into the academy and into starting this new business, is defining what I wanted my life to look like and how much I needed to earn to be able to do that, and start taking actions towards those goals. So that's how I work with my clients now. Like, the very first thing that we will do together is the definition stage, because if you don't know what you're working towards and why, then you're just on default setting, you're just sort of accidentally doing things that are good and bad and not really thinking about it. So now the first thing we do is it's the definition. This is my dream framework. I'm sure I've mentioned it in one of the episodes already, but it's that working out what you actually want your life to look like, how much money you need to earn to do that, how much time you want to work, etc. And then figuring out how to get that. And I think if you listen back to the strategy episode, like, part of this is covered in there, is like, we then need to reflect on actually how close we are to that and what we need to change to be able to get there. So like what I did in Excel and property, is that I knew that, my one-to-one work was the big money spinner. It was the bit that was making me the most amount of money, but it was also taking me the most amount of time. So yes, it was a difficult decision to choose to turn off the tap on that one-to-one entirely, but I had to do it to be able to free up my time. So you do have to make difficult decisions, but ultimately you've got to think about the longer game and what you're working towards. Then the next stage of my framework is the elevation bit. So we're then working on what we can do to improve what's already there and what else we need to do to grow on that. So those three stages are all things that we work on together if you're working with me one-to-one. But obviously also you need to go away and do the homework yourself and review all the things that you're doing. Then the next bit is the action. And this is obviously for you as the client to be doing the majority of, but I'm here to support you. I always found that having an accountability buddy is sort of one of the best ways to get stuff done, because if you tell someone you're going to do it, and then next time you see them, if they ask you, have you done it, you then have to come up with a whole bunch of excuses as to why you haven't done it, or you could just do it and achieve it. So that's the next stage of the program. And then the final bit is the momentum. So what can we do to keep you staying motivated and taking action and making those incremental steps towards your dream life, your dream business, and getting you to a place where you can do all the things you want to be doing and some, and have a lovely life. Because that is the goal, I think, for me, ultimately, is like, my goal is to have a lovely life. My goal is to help other people have a lovely life. And I wasn't having a lovely life in the way that I was running my business before. I was miserable, I was burnt out, I was working all the hours, and I actually just wasn't really living, and I was staying at home. I was not being fun. It's interesting, actually, the other day I asked some girlfriends a question about, like, tell me some stories that, tell me some memories of, or things that I do that make you smile or laugh. And they all said things from quite a few years ago. And I sort of slightly was expecting that to be the case, because they were pointing at things from before I got ill and stressed and anxious, etc. Because from that point onwards, I was just so in my own head that I became too serious, too overthinking, always worrying, etc. And now, hopefully, I can create new fun memories with those friends, with new friends, showing back to how I was, because now I feel freer and lighter, because I've taken away the things in my business that were making me miserable, and I've changed the things in my life that were making me miserable, and focused on the things that are and will make me happy. And I say that's what I wish for myself, that's what I wish for all of you listening. So if this resonates with you and you'd like to have a discuss working together with me, then please do get in touch. You'll find me on LinkedIn. The best way is get me on LinkedIn and send me a DM, and I'd love to discuss that with you, because I've got lots of different ways that we can work together, short term, long term, online only, whatever you want, because ultimately I just want to help as many people as possible to create businesses that they love, to create a life that they love, and for everyone to be happy. And on that super cheesy note, I will leave it there. I apologise for my voice in today's episode. I'm sure it was super scratchy because I'm recording this at the end of the day, unlike my usual morning recordings. But thank you so much for listening, and hopefully I will hear from some of you soon. Thank you for listening to the Lifestyle Business Show with Lucy Gordon. If you're ready to spend less time in your business, head to lucygordon.com/time to download your free guide.